Future Proof Masterclasses are anything that will future proof your career and life. And we are so excited today to both co-host with Global Shapers from the World Economic Forum with Neville Lai and Alexander So here, and to feature our fabulous guest, Christina Wallace. Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so I saw the Portfolio Life and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I don't even actually know where I saw it, but I was like, we've got to have you on. And you mentioned to me, I mean, I work with senior executives. I'm in my third act. And you were like, I think that millennials and Gen Z and all these folks need to hear it. And I had just gone to speak with the Global Shapers and I talked to Neville and Alexander and they said, yeah, sure, let's go for it. So Alexander, tell us a little bit about the Global Shapers and introduce Christina.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Alex, and I'm representing the Global Shapers in Hong Kong, and I assume everyone else from the other hubs. So we are a branch of young change makers and social makers who work with the World Economic Forum. So we're from the ages of 20 to 30. And we look to do social initiative projects and look for key interesting ideas that we can share with the world and look for how we can make change. So we don't work like with Diana with senior executives. We're more on the grassroots and the lower levels. So I think it's a great mix of having both, and it's a different perspective for us. And so we're very happy to have Christina here to share how we can improve in our 20s, our 30s, 40s, 50s, and whenever, because it's always about life learning. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Christina, and she's a lecturer at Harvard Business School, and she's written a lot of books regarding this idea of having a portfolio life. How do you change your life and focus on being multidimensional? I think we've been brought up through the generations and decades of focusing on one thing, becoming something that's the best, being an expert in something. But I think with this book, it really changes people's minds and gives them a different perspective of how we can live our lives. So I think without further ado, Christina, would you like to share more about it? Share about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So absolutely thrilled to be with you. I'll tell you a little bit about the Portfolio Life and how it came to be. I have been someone who has lived a zigzag path, built a zigzag career my entire life. And I not so jokingly say I wrote this book in part to explain to my mother what the hell I'm doing with my life. But I think it's a joke, but it's also serious in that older generations were told to pick a thing and then focus and specialize and rise up the ladder, and be loyal to a company, certainly be consistent with an industry, don't have gaps on your resume, don't change jobs too often, right? Like all of these things, I'm seeing some head nods, right? Like this is what you were told. That was best practice for my mom's generation, even for like Gen Xers. That was how we built careers. And then millennials came along. I'm about to turn 40, so I don't feel young anymore, but we came along, we got out of school right as the financial crisis hit. And then just one thing after another, like getting traction in a career kept proving elusive. And so for many of us, we had to go about this path, really thinking about what else do I bring to the table and how can I monetize my skills? How can I be resilient and creative and figure out where I fit in the world, because the world doesn't seem to make sense the same way that it did to my parents. But what's interesting about millennials going down this path, and certainly Gen Z behind us, is that now older generations are recognizing they too can and need to be creative and resilient and think about what other skills and curiosities they bring to the table, because this isn't about a generation, it's about a moment in the way the world works. Constant disruption from left, right, and center, technological, ecological, geopolitical, all of it. Every few years, we're getting thrown for a loop. And entire industries are coming out of nowhere and others are dying at the same time, right? And so there's this inability to plan a 40-year path anymore. And so this is relevant across the generations. It just might look very different if this is how you are building your career from the ground up at 20 versus how you are adjusting to maybe the final chapter at 55, 60, 65. Any way around it, though, the portfolio life, I say, is based on 3 tenets. Number 1, you are more than your job, and not just more than your job today, more than like any singular role, opportunity, way that you monetize your time. You are so much bigger than that. Number 2, diversification will help you mitigate uncertainty and navigate change. And then number 3, when, not if, when your life changes, rebalance your portfolio in the same way that you would your financial portfolio for different phases of your life. And so it's really sort of stealing that idea from the financial world and bringing it into your life. And I really emphasize this is about a portfolio life and not just a portfolio career, which is a term that's become more common, because your work and your career is in the context of your life. And some of the biggest shifts that I've had to make in my portfolio have been in moments that my life has changed and my needs have changed. And so I need to adjust my career commensurately. And we can talk about all of those things in more detail, but I wanted to give that as a foundational start.
That's amazing. One of the things that I think is so interesting about the portfolio life, which I definitely subscribe to, is that during the Great Resignation, during the pandemic, there seemed to be this shift. Like everybody said, you know what, I know what's important to me. It's not 99% work and fit the life in around the edges. And now you see the swing back where people are like, literally, I've had somebody say, I am so glad that the labor market is not so tight because, you know, I'm tired of placating my employees. So, like, is it possible? I was like, oh no, let's go back. Is it possible that now that in this market, you can still do that? What do you think about where we are now and what's possible?
I think it's more important in this market to do it because what you're hearing from the employer side is exactly why you as an employee need a portfolio. When you lose negotiating power, when you lose the ability to sort of ask for what you need, because if you do, they're going to lay you off or just flat out fire you, then you absolutely should have other irons in the fire, whether that's a moonlighting gig, a little side hustle with some income, whether that's other networks and relationships and skills that you know you can lean on. The more that employers feel like they have the power in the relationship, the more you need to be really thoughtful about that diversification. And so this is one of the biggest changes, I think, you know, in my mom's era, that it felt safe to take a job at a big company, to build a career, to go all in and be loyal. That felt safe. And it felt risky to be an entrepreneur or to do anything kind of on her own. And I would argue it's the exact reverse now. I mean, you see folks being laid off who've been in these roles 10, 15, 16 years, who are like, me? I've been loyal. I've been here. And you're like, yeah, because you're the expensive one now. And they'll do it, you know, without a bat of their eye. So yeah, it might be harder, and you might need to be more strategic about how much you show your employer in your portfolio. But more than ever, you should be thinking about how you're diversifying.
I think that's a really interesting point. And with time and things changing, especially with information coming at such a huge amount over time, people are scared of failure because there's more information and people know more things and there's more risk involved. So for people moving towards a portfolio life, trying to build up and taking all the information they have possible, how do we get over that fear of failure and just get started? How do we move towards that direction?
Yeah, I mean, failure is going to be part of this process. I wrote a whole chapter on failure because it's important that we discuss the big F word. If you think about a financial portfolio, you want to build some risk into your allocations, right? There's a relationship between risk and reward. Now, you don't put your entire financial portfolio into something excessively risky, but you want to do some things that have a big payoff. And you diversify by having other assets in things that are a little bit more stable. And that ensures that in moments like high inflationary periods, you don't have all your money sitting in cash under your mattress where you can't get any payoff. And so you want to think about the same way in your portfolio life. You have to take some risks, but you can think about, how do I mitigate those risks with other pieces that are a little more stable? And a common example of this is to keep your day job while building a company on the side, whether it's meant to be something, gigantic that eventually you quit the day job and go all in on, or whether it's meant to be something, maybe it's just a line of work, or something you think more of like a side hustle that you just want to keep going as you continue your day job. In either way, it doesn't hurt as much if that side thing doesn't pan out because you still have the day job. And then if the side thing does really go somewhere, you can pull that allocation on the day job down, go part-time, quit altogether, and go in a different direction. So it's a way to build the ability to take risks into your portfolio. The challenge is, if you are someone who has succeeded your entire life, as I imagine many of you are, it is really hard to try something where you're not sure you're going to succeed. It's hard psychologically, right? The narrative, the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, it's inconsistent with this idea that you could fail. And so part of this work is to start practicing failing small in areas that don't matter at all. I tell a story in the book about how I took up long distance running because I am really bad at long distance running. I'm really bad. I run a 6-hour marathon. It's embarrassing. I've done it 3 times. So I decided to pick a hobby that I knew I was bad at in order to practice the effort of, I'm going to show up and keep trying and get better, even if I never become amazing, because that helps change that narrative so that I'm willing to take some risks. And once you do that, you start to realize that failure, at least in my definition of it, is just a moment where things didn't turn out the way you wanted them to, or the way you thought they would. And it could be because of something you did. Maybe you failed, but it also could be because of something outside of you, an external force that you have no control over. Maybe the market shifted right as you went to start that business, or any other number of factors, right? And so you start to recognize that there's not like a moral failing in those moments of failure. It is just I tried, things didn't work out. What did I learn about me or the world or both? And how can I use that new information to move forward?
So that's fantastic. And one of the things that Alexander and I were talking about before was, he is in the beginning of his career, and he was saying, you go in during school and you're super broad, and then in a way you're focusing. You're in this moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I got to pick something and focus on it. I'm at the middle of my career. I've already been successful in different things, failed at many. And the costs actually for this group of people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, it's like, oh my God, my whole identity is I'm the CEO, and I make money, and I have kids put through college and all that kind of thing. So when you're looking at it, when is like the perfect time to be thinking about a portfolio life? Like, how does it change over time? Or do you feel like there's this moment where you're like, yeah, okay, now I'm ready. This is a perfect time.
A great question. I would argue a portfolio life, I mean, you all have one today. You have a de facto portfolio. That de facto portfolio might be 75% work, 10% family, 10% friends, 5% stressing out. Right? Like that might be your portfolio. And you could argue that it's not a well-balanced, well-diversified portfolio, but you can start recognizing, like I have 2 young children, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And what really solidified this model for me is when I decided to have kids. I was an entrepreneur for 10 years, all through my 20s and early 30s, right out of business school. I was all in and on work. Now, I still had multiple things going on. I built a business, as my day job, and then I had some side hustles, and I also sang in a choir, and I would go travel the world and trek through the Himalayas and climb mountains, and that was a meaningful part of who I was. I just didn't really put much time toward a family. I was single for a lot of it, and I just, as much as I said I wanted a relationship, I left no space for one. So my de facto portfolio was, looking like a lot of work and a fair amount of play and not a ton of relationships. And then I met my husband. We got married. We decided to have kids. And I was like, oh, I have to dramatically rebalance my portfolio because the type of mom I want to be is not consistent with like 85% of my time being spent on various projects. And when I started rebalancing, I realized that one of the things I really need for this phase where my children are so young is I need a ton of flexibility and autonomy in my work because they are constantly sick. Constantly. The daycare plague is real. And so being an entrepreneur, building something from the ground up, getting other people to take big chances and join with me, raising venture capital to go, it was not consistent with what I needed for this phase of my life. And that is why I decided to come join the faculty at Harvard Business School and be a professor of entrepreneurship for this chapter. I'm still in this world. I still get to be an angel investor and advise companies. I still get to kind of noodle around on ideas and stay sharp there. But my day-to-day work is teaching and advising and writing. I have no boss. I manage no one. It is the perfect job for young children. And that makes space for my family, my friends, a lot of 50% of my portfolio right now is relationships in some dimension or another. And it's a much smaller focus on my work. And that is what this chapter needs. Now, I'm still ruminating of should I turn the book into a podcast? Should I go pitch a TV show? There are things, right, percolating that are super high risk and probably won't pan out, but they're still there. Right? I haven't given up my ambition. I'm just refocusing it in different ways for this chapter. Now, the second my 1-year-old hits kindergarten, you better watch out. I am back in it, right? And so this is how you think about what does your portfolio look like between paid work, unpaid, whether it's hobbies, community involvement, caretaking, the relationships you want or that you have and that you're investing in, your health. I'm about to turn 40. I got to put a lot more effort in my health than I did when I was 25. And so what are the pieces and how do you allocate it? And what I love about this model is you start recognizing, as I am someone who has burned out many times because I don't understand limits. So as you're putting the pieces of your life together, you have a capacity, you have a limit. And if you try to shove too many things in there, you will burn out. And so as you're putting the pieces of your life together, your paid work, your family, your hobbies, your relationships, your friends, your rest. I know overachievers never plan for rest in their portfolios, but you need to. As you put it together, you start having kind of your ambition hits up against reality. And I find it allows me this moment of conversation with have I committed to too much? Do I need to triage and prioritize and maybe put something on the back burner for right now, not forever, just for now, because I am at my capacity? And one of the things that I suggest, maybe push you on, if you want to use that word in the book, is to really think about maxing out at 85% of your capacity, not 100%, not this idea of give 110%, that's BS, 85%. And I come to that number kind of through two different routes. One is through research I found in operations management, that talks about how the best run manufacturing facilities in the world, the ones that are like fully automated, worked out their kinks, like it's seamless. They run at 85% capacity. They schedule downtime for maintenance, for do-overs, for rush orders from their most important customers. They schedule downtime because they recognize that scheduled downtime is cheaper than unscheduled downtime. Put another way, you can either take a nap or you can burn out, but one way or another, your body is going to find its way into a horizontal position in your bed, right? And it's a lot easier to take a nap than to have like a full-on burnout, or as I did, get mono and pneumonia at the same time. So how can you limit your life to this 85% to leave the space for the surges and for the moments where you're human, you're going to make mistakes, you have that space.
So true.
I'm going to stop talking. That was a lot for me.
I think it was great. And I think that's something that people don't think about. And one of the things you bring up in your book that really resonates with this whole idea is identity. And who are we? I think if I ask this room, who are you? In the chat, most people would probably say, I'm a lawyer, I'm a consultant. It's mainly about your career. So when we talk about identity, looking at who people think we are, who we think we are, and who we want to be, how do we merge those different identities together and build towards a portfolio? Is there some diagram, some sort of model that we can use?
There is. This is such a great question. So I talk about there are 4 pillars of the portfolio life, and the first one is identity. All of this starts from who you are and what you bring to the table. And I start from there because, you know, my first company was a total failure, dramatic failure. So much of a failure, we wrote a case study on the failure for Harvard Business School, and we teach it every year to all 900 MBAs. Textbook failure. I say this because in that moment that we failed, and I had to go home to my apartment and like crawl into bed, I was like, I don't know who I am anymore. I can't go to a party because I don't know how to introduce myself. I'm no longer the CEO and co-founder of Quincy Apparel. Like, what am I? And so I had this first a crisis of confidence. Then I just ignored it and watched all 7 seasons of The West Wing, which takes about 3 weeks, in case you're wondering. And then I was like, okay, I have no new information. So I got to do something else if I want to solve this. And then I went out and talked to the people who knew me and loved me. And I asked them 3 questions because I could not see who I was in that moment. And so I needed them to tell me what they saw. I asked them 3 questions. When have you seen me happiest? What do you come to me for? Like, what's that moment where you're like, you know what? I should see what Christina thinks about this. And where do I stand out against my peers? Where do I like peek at something that maybe I don't even realize is a superpower because it comes so easily, but you're like, no one else can do that. I asked them those 3 questions, and I did like 70 of these coffee chats. That was overkill. You don't have to do 70. I'm a little extra. You can do like 10. But as parts of these conversations, you start realizing that there are patterns and that, any individual data point, not super relevant, but when you start hearing the same thing over and over again, that's when you should start taking note. And what I found really helpful in that moment was that I realized I bring a lot to the table. But one of the things, very importantly, that I bring is an intersectional, multidisciplinary view of the world. I double majored and triple minored. I have always had lots of different things going on: math, music, physics, political science, theater. Like, I live in all of these different worlds. And one of the things that gives me is that I can connect these dots in really kind of diagonal ways. I don't necessarily have new ideas, but I can steal an idea from here and propagate it over there, and boom, it's innovative, right? Clay Christensen called this the power of associative thinking. And so I realized that the way I introduce myself now is that I say I'm a human Venn diagram. And I've built a career at the intersection of business, technology, and the arts. And what I do within those worlds is all over the place. Sometimes I'm speaking, sometimes I'm writing, sometimes I'm building. I do a lot of different things, but that is how I can, in a really clear and unified way, give you an understanding of who I am and where I sit. And so there's an exercise in the book about figuring out what's in your Venn diagram. I think everyone has a Venn diagram. It's about what's in it. And as you start thinking through, what are my skills, my networks, who do I have access to? What am I curious about? Maybe I'm not particularly gifted at it, but I'm fascinated by it and I want to learn more. That's something that you can bring to the table. What are the things that maybe you're known for? You're that person everyone comes to for personal finance advice, or like you always make the cake for your friends' birthday parties. What are the other things you bring? And once you start putting them together, you see that there are overlaps, there are intersections. That's the Venn diagram piece. And part of those intersections are the places that you have a unique insight that others might not. So one of the exercises really starts from what's in your Venn diagram and kind of how do you map it out? And how does that maybe give you permission to pivot or to add different things to your portfolio that you're not currently thinking about? Because maybe you put all that away as you grew up and looked serious and focused. And you're like, but actually, I really would love to learn more about marine biology. Great. On the table.
That is wonderful. And on that note, I think that we're going to go into breakout rooms for 10 minutes. One of the things I love about the people in the room is that we have a real mix. So we're going to put you guys into breakout rooms and we're going to ask you to talk about what's in your Venn diagram. So Fez, if you can pop those questions into the chat now, and we'll put them into your breakout rooms as well, so you guys can see what those questions are. We'll put you into breakout rooms of 3 for 10 minutes, total strangers, maybe some people you know, and you can talk about what you're known for, what you are most curious about, and what makes you happiest. And then if you have time, you can talk about how these things associate or overlap.
85% though, like that sounds quite technical. But
I mean, the other way to think about it, I forgot to mention this, the other way from, if you're not so much into the thinking about yourself like a manufacturing line, 85% as a fraction is 6/7. So anyone who comes from a religious tradition that believes in a Sabbath or thinks about even just on average over the course of your week, you want sort of one out of 7 days to be downtime. Obviously, it doesn't mean you want to be working and like busy 6 days and then like laying on a bed flat on your face all day on the day 7. But like, how could you kind of spread out 1 day's worth of rest or space across the week as one way to think about your free time?
6/7. That's very interesting. Because we work 5 days a week, though.
Yeah.
Remember, your portfolio is not just work. It's your family. It's your workouts, it's climbing mountains, it's all the things. And then
the 7th day is none of those things. Rest.
It's exactly. So how can you distribute some of that rest truly? And it's not even just like, take a nap or a bath or self-care. It's literally just unscheduled time that you have not allocated to something. So even, when I'm not doing work, but I'm hanging out with my kiddos, like that's scheduled time, that's allocated to them. So how can I carve out unallocated time that gives me the space for serendipity, the space for do-overs,
the
space for like meandering and staring out at the sky with nothing on my mind?
I am terrified that I look at my kids, and my 13-year-old, and they're at school and they're like, I got to crush it. I got to get into college. And, my 13-year-old's like, no, Mom, I can't rest. I have all this stuff to do. And I was like, oh my God,
I know. My 3.5-year-old has already started to use the
going.
word perfect as she like draws. She's like, it has to be perfect. And I was like, where did you learn this idea? There's no such thing as perfect. And certainly not when it comes to art. I was like, you're making a rainbow. And she's like, it's gotta be, and she'll like ball up the whole thing and start over. She's like, it wasn't perfect. It's like, oh, okay. We got some work cut out for us here.
Yeah, because I think the thing about young people these days was that if we're not doing anything, so we're trying to keep ourselves very busy, and if you have some unscheduled time, or you have time to just stare at the sky with no agenda, it seems to us that we are not as highly achieving as we wanted ourselves to be. I think
it
that's sort of
feels
the mindset.
lazy, right?
Yeah,
it's unproductive.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing is, you are not put on this earth to be productive. There are so many other things that your life can and should be for you. It's not just about achievement and productivity and being impressive. Like the day you turn 30 and you haven't made the Forbes 30 under 30 list, it's freeing. It's freeing because it doesn't matter. There's so many of these
But
like
now they have
accolades
40
and awards and
under 40
rankings. I
under
know,
40
I
over
know.
50.
Don't tell me, Diana, I'm about to turn 42. I still haven't made that list. The thing is, like, none of this matters. And you hear this and it's easy to roll your eyes. I'm like, on your deathbed, what are you gonna, and you're kind of like, okay, but I want my life to matter before then. And I get that. But part of this, the other part we didn't get to, the 100 wishes, is across all of your life, all the things that you want to experience and the people you want to love and the imprint that you want your life to leave. What does that look like? That's where, like, write down 100 wishes, and maybe 30 of them are about your career. Maybe it's like, I want to be president. I want to be a CEO. You're like, great. That's awesome. That matters. That's only like 30. You got 70 more you got to come up with of like, okay, what else matters? And that's when you start recognizing, as you kind of map out, what do you wish for your life and how are you currently spending your time? You start to see some disconnects, which is really
100%.
interesting. And again, you're going to go through chapters. You might argue in your 20s, as I did, you want to be all in on ambition. You got to get a head start. You got to get some momentum. I totally get that. But how are you still making space for the other things that matter to you? The people, the joy, the adventures, so that you're not just working all the time in the hopes of some like gold star.
Yeah, that tarnishes pretty quickly.
I will also tell you, as someone who now doesn't get to do anything fun because all of my time and money are being given to my children, it is amazing that I had so many adventures in my 20s.
Oh,
like, that was a good time.
Yeah.
I backpacked to like 40 different countries. I climbed mountains and went on, and I'm just like, that was really fun. I'm so grateful I did that.
As
I'm
somebody
now
who
I'm
did
going
that
to
at
bed at 8:30.
same. Yeah. I remember when my husband and I did quite a bit of that together, because we met out here, and it was so nice to have young kids and be like, it's okay. We did that.
It's okay.
We did Trek Nepal. We've done all that. We did that, a lot of it together.
And you can do it again once they're, self-sufficient. But right
well,
now,
in 20 years.
I know. I have to say, what is it, 2016, 17? I went and trekked in the Altai Mountains in Mongolia. And it was the first time I did it just by myself, long trip away from my kids. And I was like, it was so great.
Yeah.
I haven't done it like every other month since then.
One of the things I
India.
love about solo travel is that it forces you to sit with yourself. Because one of the things I realized, one of the reasons why I was so productive in my 20s was I was afraid of sitting still, in large part because I didn't want to deal with my thoughts myself. I was like, I'm not the best company to keep necessarily. I'm anxious. I'm stressed out all the time, right? And so if you just stay busy and you keep achieving things and checking things off a to-do list, you never have to sit with yourself. And once I started traveling alone and I had long train rides or missed flights or time between, I'd make friends along the way. I would meet up with other solo travelers and we would hang together for a few days, but you still have these long stretches of time by yourself. And you realize that like, oh, I gotta like deal with some of my hangups. I've got to become a better friend to myself, a more interesting person to hang out with myself. And then you start realizing you don't have to achieve a bunch of stuff just to avoid stillness. It also makes you a better partner because you've focused on how to be a better and more interesting person yourself first. And then other people want to spend time with you too. It's self-reinforcing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I would love to hear from people in terms of what they put in their Venn diagram. I'm super curious. Anybody want to unmute or raise their hand and tell me? Claire, you're laughing. I love that. What happened?
We had a great session with two of your students, actually, Andy and Sunny.
Oh, wonderful.
About the Future Proof class.
Okay. So what was in your Venn?
We're still trying to figure out, actually. But I think that one of the key takeaway from our conversation is about thinking of diversification. Start from now on. Yeah. Taking risk and thinking of what else you can bring to the table.
Interesting. Very cool. Anybody else have some interesting takeaways?
I think something that we found in our conversation was all three of us in our breakout room were like kind of driven by relationship building and people and like learning from people and learning with people and growing with people. I think that's kind of one thing that like everybody in our room kind of came together on that, because it was like what made us happiest was being with people we care about. What like we were curious about was what causes people to make decisions or building those relationships through that. And I think it was just quite nice to meet other people like that and see like how different people who have like maybe like the same drive, how they see it differently as well. So it was quite a good experience for us.
I love that, because that's a great example of, as you think about what do you need to be your best self, what do you need to be happy? If relationships and people are a key part of what makes you the best version of yourself, you won't want to, for example, take some ridiculously impressive, highly ambitious job that surrounds you with horrible people, right? It seems obvious when you say that out loud, but it can be really hard when you're like, oh, it's an impressive company. My parents have heard of it. It's a big step up. It's a nice bump in pay. And you're like, yes, but if relationships and people and who you surround yourself with every day really affect your happiness, your ability to do your work, your ability to be successful, why would you take the impressive thing that surrounds you with toxic people? So it's a good way to like gut check against, as I'm thinking about opportunities or moves or zigzags, like, does this fit with what I need? And, are there pieces of, not every opportunity is going to be a perfect fit for everything, but how can I meet my needs across the different pieces of my portfolio? I love that example.
Yeah, I highly recommend you write it down, because there's nothing like gut checking to something you've written before you had to make the decision. You're like, oh, I thought I liked relationships. Stephanie, what do you have?
I think I found it most interesting that when we actually sat together to discuss these questions, I was just really struck by, we always think about, I think, what is my purpose in life or what makes things meaningful for me. But I don't think I've ever revisited actual questions that could help me tap into that. And when we sat together, with my group mates, with Damien and Ching, I just really got the chance to see how different all of these, like what makes us tick essentially. And also to sit together and talk about it, just reminded me of how much relationship building means to me. So just in the very act of doing that discussion, I found it really enlightening to answer those questions. So thanks for facilitating that. It was really, really fun.
Awesome.
Great. I love that. This is like not just getting to hear you talk, Christina, but it's like putting everybody to work so that they can really apply.
It's a great insight that like, you don't have to do this work alone. Like you don't have to go and sit in your apartment and stare at your notebook and be like, who am I? right? Like sometimes you figure out who you are by talking to other people and hearing who they are, right? That can spur some insights. You're like, oh yeah, that matters to me too. And I hadn't thought of that. So like, there's no award for doing this the hard way. Do it whatever is the most effective way.
Fantastic. Does anybody have other things to share? Or we can also shift to anybody who wants to ask Christina a question directly, because one of the opportunities is, of course, not just to have her come and do a podcast or something and hoard her, but to give access to everybody to ask questions, like we're at a cocktail party. Stephanie, is it, and am I saying it right? Stephanie Levitas?
That's right. That's right. Hey, Christina. Hey, everybody. I'm very curious with, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say the word that literally everyone says every 2 minutes, but with AI and, you know, the change of work and, you know, kind of how do you like reshape your portfolio, you know, given the world is just taking this complete 180, changing everything. And I feel like, you know, yes, I love relationship building and I love, you know, working with people, but it seems like the more I look into the future, the less of that I'm going to be doing. So like, what are your thoughts on that? And how do you see that changing?
Yeah, I mean, it's literally on everyone's minds. What I find fascinating is when I locked in the text to this book in November, no one had ever heard the phrase Chat GPT. Like that is how fast this has changed. And anyone who is in law school right now or getting their like accounting degree, I really hope there are lots of other things in your Venn diagram, because like white collar work is going to absolutely be turned upside down. What I do believe, though, is after a period of what's going to be some really awkward and painful kind of reorganization, there will be new jobs that AI will allow and create and engender. You just have to be at a position where you are able and willing to grow into them and to learn on the go. And so part of this is like, do you have other things in your Venn diagram maybe that you can monetize through a period where you might be laid off, where the whole industry might go through contractions? Are there other industries you have relationships in and a network in? If not, start building that now. You know, I give an example in the book of one of my friends who was a Broadway actress through the COVID era. Like Broadway shut down, and also so did every like restaurant and bartending job for tourists in New York, which is the typical fallback job for artists between gigs. And so she really took a left turn. She had been learning how to code through a boot camp. It wasn't anything serious. It was just sort of a hobby for her. And she realized, at least for the short term, Broadway was not an option. And so she went into coding and literally like got her first job at a tech startup, not as an engineer at first. She was sitting between the engineering team and the customer success team because unlike some engineers, I don't want to be a gross generalization here, but she knows how to talk to people. She has fantastic communication skills. And so being able to interact with and understand the engineering team, but also connect with and work with customers was a superpower in her industry. She decided after doing that for a year that she really loved it and did want to double down on engineering. She just started a new job yesterday at Spotify as a front-end dev. This is her third job in 3 years. She keeps getting poached because it turns out an engineer with communication skills is a great thing. It doesn't mean she's not a performer anymore. She still does cabaret shows and moonlighting stuff. She got pulled back to Broadway during the Omicron crisis when like all the actors kept getting sick and subbed in. She used to be Elphaba in Wicked. So she did one performance as Elphaba in Wicked, got like full head to toe green makeup, hatched into her harness, flew 40 feet above the stage, performed the hardest songs on Broadway, got back down, wiped off her makeup, flew home to Chicago and told her, you know, her teammates what she did over the weekend on Slack. So it doesn't stop who you are in one dimension, but in her case, it was such a dramatic disruption that she chose to make, you know, a really hard pivot in order to support her life, her family. She wants to have kids. It was just a necessary change. And so I don't mean that you have to like leave whatever industry you're in altogether, but I do think you need to be really creative and open-minded about the skills you bring to the table, the networks, the groups that you have access to, and how might you zig and zag to survive the next 5 years, because there's going to be a ton of disruption. And then once the dust settles, there's going to be a lot of growth. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for people, particularly, I think, who are great at the people skills, the relationships. There's some stuff AI can't do, or at least not yet. And so how might you bring an understanding of the technology with the insights, the relationships, and the skills that the technology can't ever replace?
I think that that's a great answer. And I can imagine how terrifying it is to go out into the world knowing that AI is, is like a competitor in a way. So that's a great story. I see all these things in the chat going, great story, I love that. And then I'm like, how can I sign up for flying through, across the stage?
I know,
what
right?
what about the portfolio life, like, and the identity that Alex was talking about? How do you tell that story? Like, one of the things that I find is some people have a happy portfolio life, but then they come and they're like, I just don't know how to explain to people without stealing your human Venn diagram that I am a,
First of all, you are all welcome to steal the human Venn diagram.
Whatever.
I want to make the human Venn diagram a thing. So you are welcome to steal it. But great question. Okay, so there's a whole other chapter in the book, not to keep pointing you back to the book, but I tried to answer all of these questions.
That's why we're here.
There's a whole chapter in the book about marketing, about being the CMO of your life. The whole last third, each chapter is like, be the CEO, think about your team, be the CFO, think about your finances, be the CMO. It's a little bit maybe cheesy, but it works. So in the CMO chapter, we really talk about how do you tell your story, because the more you have in your portfolio, I think the harder it can be for outsiders to understand the strategy, the intention. It can look a little flaky. You might look like a dilettante, depending on how you've built your life and depending on how much of it is visible. So mine is super visible. I have it all on LinkedIn. I've put it all out on my website. Other people might say, you know what? My professional identity is going to be a little bit more linear. That's what I'm going to have visible. And these hobbies, these community involvements, these other things I do, maybe I keep them off the internet. Maybe they're just for me. You can decide. I like to think there's an advantage to having your portfolio be visible, because you might find a personal connection in a professional setting because of these other unprofessional, non-professional things that you do. And so having all of that in a story that says, this is who I am, what I care about, what I bring to the table, you can find that through line. And there's some exercises in there. I'll give you the highlight. It starts with writing out like the full page version of your story. And it's like, here's what I'm doing now. Here's what I used to do. Here's how the pieces fit together. You might say, I am, as I worked with a client on this, I am a storyteller. And I have used that skill as a chief communications officer, as a ghostwriter, as a journalist, as a public speaking coach, as someone who volunteers at the library for Kids Story Hour. You should hear my voices. I'm fantastic at the Elephant and Piggy books, right? So find the through line, like what is true about how these things connect. Because if you understand why and how the pieces of your life connect, everyone else will too. And usually when people say no one understands my life, it's usually because you don't understand your life. And it's not because it doesn't make sense. It's just you haven't really put the thought together to connect the dots. And once you know and believe your story, it's really easy for other folks to follow along. And then, so you take that full page, that's the long version, then you work on condensing it to a paragraph. That's like the blurb in an email if someone wants to make an introduction for you. And then you work it down to the one-liner. That's where I'm a human Venn diagram. That is the, like, you know, the elevator pitch, or you're at the cocktail hour and we're like, so who are you? And you're like, ugh, tell me about yourself. But you work on sort of condensing it, because you start to realize a lot of and then I did this, and then that, and then the slash can feel like flailing. But as you condense it, you find the strategy, you find the through line, and that's what helps you tell that story. And then the last piece of all of this work is, where do you want that story to live? So in this day and age, you're going to be on the internet, whether you decide it or not. There's breadcrumbs about your work. You've been tagged in something, you've been mentioned in an article, you're on someone's, employee page. There are breadcrumbs about you. And so you get to decide, do I want other people to tell my story, or do I want to tell my story? And if I want to tell it, where and how do I want to tell it? Is it a website? Is it LinkedIn? Is it my social media handles? How do I want to start blogging so that my work is what shows up at the top of the Google search results when someone looks for me, rather than something someone else has written about me? So think about it that way. Where and how are the right venues for your story? Because if you are visible, people can find you. Your people can find you. And that's ultimately what I continue to harp on in the book. Everyone, in my opinion, is a weirdly shaped puzzle piece. And that's a good thing. It's a different way of saying you're a special snowflake, but you're a weirdly shaped puzzle piece. And the sooner you figure out the weird angles and the juts and the places where you dip and stick out, the faster you will figure out if you fit into the hole in the puzzle. The faster you'll find the rooms that want you, all of you, not, hey, I kind of like you, but can you shave off that one little corner because that doesn't fit? No, find the rooms that want you, find the people that want you and the relationships that want you. And once you figure out your weird shape, you'll get to a fast no a lot faster. And a fast no is a gift. And this is my dating advice to you as much as it is my job advice to you.
I think that is, thank you. I didn't even know we were going to get dating advice, but it definitely.
Did you not know I have a TED Talk on how I met my husband? There was a sales funnel involved.
I did.
Dating advice is, your life partner is like the most important choice you're going to make your entire life. So I think dating advice is relevant to your portfolio.
Who you end up with has a huge effect on the rest of your portfolio and on your career, in my opinion. So fully agree. And I think in this day and age, who you get to work with and spend so much time with is such a huge factor. So I've decided you're a walking TED Talk because it's business, technology, and arts. And so it sounds to me like that could be one of your new monikers. But we're out of time already, and we just want to wrap up by saying thank you so much. You have a bunch of people saying, I'm buying the book now. And a lot of this is just, getting to know you and giving you a platform largely in Asia, but around the world. Our chat was, Europe and US and all over the place. Fez has just popped your LinkedIn and your Portfolio Life book into the chat. And we just had so much fun, both having you and having you as a convener of a bunch of really interesting people who could come and have conversations with each other, which I hope can last beyond this hour you've graciously shared with us, because I think that you're so right. You can do it on your own, but why would you want to? It's much more fun. So thank you. Alex, any last words?
I just want to say thank you so much. I think I need the dating advice as well. So that's I think one question that I've always thought about is, how do I present myself? Especially as a young person, people usually see us very angsty, not knowing what we're doing, not mature enough to make decisions. And so I think that this is exactly like a Bible for us to figure out our own lives and find a path. So I hope that everyone else has questions that they'd like to ask, and one day can email Christina, read the book, I guess, read the Bible, and
I think
please
you just
don't be a
knocked
stranger.
Adam Grant off of the front cover. I mean, Alexander So comparing you to the Bible, I think is
I'll take
probably
it.
a
I'll
better,
take
way
it.
better quote than Adam Grant. Get that guy off the cover.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to meet all you. Please don't be a stranger. You can always send me a note on LinkedIn or through my website. It goes straight to my Gmail. It was great to meet you all.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks so much for coming to do the Future Proof Masterclass with Global Shapers. We really appreciate your time, Christina. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.